If I can get this, you can get it too. In English, the sentence I ran and I built a house feel the same in their underlying logic. You're the subject, you're the one doing the work, whether it's running or building. But in ergative languages, making up about 25% of the world's languages, that isn't true. In those languages, the version of you that runs is grammatically identical to the house being built, not the person building it. Today, we're going to look at the mystery of the subject and the backwards logic of ergativity. If you're new to the channel, welcome. I'm Dr. Taylor Jones. I've got a PhD in linguistics from the University of Pennsylvania, and here on the channel, I talk about everything related to language, linguistics, language learning, and culture. If you're into those topics, be sure to subscribe and ring the bell for notifications. Today, I'm going to attempt taking a notoriously challenging concept in linguistics and putting it into the simplest possible terms. It's not inherently complicated, it just requires breaking things down into smaller pieces and a slight perspective shift. Once you see it, there's a sort of elegance to the system. And, more importantly, it has recently provided us with a window into deeper aspects of human language, both in terms of how some languages see the world and how some mind-bending patterns can arise naturally. People think linguists have basically solved language, but we're talking huge discoveries in 1972 and 1978. Dozens of you have asked me to cover ergativity.
There are dozens of us!
So let's get into it. This is Language Jones. I constantly get requests for an explanation of ergativity, and it's no mystery why. It's a topic you're likely to encounter if you're at all interested in linguistics, and it's also one that is often poorly explained. I think the main reason for this is that it requires breaking our assumptions about grammar and how the world works. But, and this is crucial, it's actually not that hard to grasp once all the pieces are in place. If I can do it, you can do it. What one man can do, another can do.
What one man can do, another can do.
I'm going to kill a bear. So I'm going to attempt to make it as clear and simple as possible. By the end of this video, you'll understand what ergativity is and how it works, what a split ergative system is, how ergativity arises, and the difference between morphological and syntactic ergativity. But in order to get there, we have to break a fundamental piece of grammar that has been simply assumed to exist since the time of the ancient Greeks. This is the mystery of the subject. Traditional approaches to grammar, going all the way back to Aristotle, posit the idea of a subject, and it's a pretty intuitive idea, especially for English speakers, and I guess for speakers of ancient Greek too. The subject is the thing we're talking about. It's the topic. It's the noun that the verb has to agree with. And in an Aristotelian framework, it's the thing that the whole rest of the sentence is commenting on. The predicate comes on the subject. A sentence like, John goes to work late every Tuesday would have the subject, John, and the predicate, literally everything else. But as with many things, when you start digging into subjects, it's more complicated and fuzzy than it seems at first glance. What's the subject of, it's going to rain? It? Is there a subject in a sentence like, Joey, what a character? Remember those old cartoons where a school of fish would swim in the shape of a bigger fish than the fish that was trying to eat the little fish in the school? No? Just me? Well, the grammatical subject, once people started questioning it seriously, is a little bit like that. From the distance, it looks like one thing, one big school of fish. But when you get closer, you realize you're looking at a lot of different things all working together, in some languages to give the appearance of being one thing. So in English and related languages, the default case is one where the topic, agent, and nominative case all line up. Let's define those. Topic is kind of intuitive. It's what we're talking about. But it doesn't have to be the other two things. So take that sentence, Joey, what a character, or President Nixon, now more than ever. The noun isn't controlling a verb. What's the verb in that sentence? And it doesn't really make sense to say there's a subject and a predicate. The 1972 campaign slogan wasn't, President Nixon is now more than ever. It just asserts a topic, President Nixon, and comments on it. And languages do this all the time. It's a main default approach to the grammar of Mandarin, which is spoken by about 2 billion people. Agent, on the other hand, is a semantic role. I've talked about these on the channel before. Semantic roles, also known as thematic roles or theta roles, if you want to sound jargony and futuristic, but you're a huge dork, are a group of conceptual categories about what a noun is doing in a sentence. So, my dog ate my homework. The dog is the agent, the active doer, and the homework is the patient, the thing acted upon. There are others, including experiencers, themes, goals, and so on, but they don't really matter here, and linguists argue about exactly what they are and how many of them exist. Lastly, nominative case is where we start getting into circular reasoning territory. I'm going to try to avoid all that by just saying it's often the unmarked or default form of the word, and in equational sentences, sentences like X is a Y, a corgi is a dog, it's often the case on both of the nouns if the language marks case. Our concept of subject conflates all three. It's not a regular adult businessman going about his day, it's three children in a trench coat with sunglasses and a fake mustache. And ergative alignment just works differently. By the way, now's as good a time as any to mention that if you're into this kind of thing, I'm currently building a digital introductory course in linguistics for regular people that will cover all the topics that you'd learn in Ling 1, but better, clearer, more engaging, and a whole lot cheaper than tuition at the Ivy League I last taught at. You can sign up for updates and get on the waitlist at www.languagejones.com/blueprint if you're interested. So ergativity is doing its own thing, but how? Well, we need a couple of building blocks. First, we want to differentiate between sentences like Will left and Stevie played the piano. I think about this like once a week. So sentences with one noun and sentences with two. And we also need to distinguish between thematic roles of agent, the doer, and patient, the doee, the done to. The literature on ergativity accomplishes this by comparing relationships among three things: S, A, and P. S is ostensibly single and is the only participant in an intransitive sentence, the one with one noun. The man runs. Bernard Comrie notes that it's also perhaps intentionally evocative of subject. A is the agent in a transitive sentence, the man, in the man sees the woman. And P is the patient, the undergoer, in the transitive sentence, the woman, in the man sees the woman. I'm not sure if the usual way of representing this visually works, but this is the way that it's usually done. The idea is that in nominative-accusative alignment languages, what English speakers think of as the default, the agent in a transitive sentence looks the same as the only noun in an intransitive sentence. And more often than not, that's the sort of default form a noun takes, especially if you have a language with morphological case marking, meaning different shapes of the words depending on what they're doing in the sentence. In ergative-absolutive languages, it's the other possible configuration, and that's actually how ergative gets its name. Ergative comes from ancient Greek ergates, worker, laborer, with the English iv suffix on it. It marks the worker, the doer. Fun aside, ergates also comes from ergon, work, and that comes ultimately from Proto-Indo-European werg, whence work in English. The absolutive part is just a word that means the default, normal, everywhere, not special form of the word. So you have a usual form of the word, but when it's the worker or the doer in a transitive construction, then it gets a specific morphological marker. It gets ergative case. So to put this into imaginary ergative English using pronouns to illustrate it, it would be like if you said, he saw her, but you had to say, him runs for it to be grammatical, or her runs. There's a lot more cool stuff to discuss, which I'll get to in a second, but the basic idea is just this. One, there are two types of sentences we care about here. Sentences with a verb and one noun, and sentences with a verb and two nouns, or more. When you have two nouns, which one looks the same as when it's in a sentence with one noun, and which one gets marked somehow? And three, I'm going to use pronouns to illustrate this using English, but it's exactly the same idea. In nominative-accusative languages, the noun that appears alone, he runs, the pronoun there, stays the same as when it appears with another, as the agent, the doer, the worker. He sees her. In ergative languages, you have one form of a noun or pronoun when it's the only one in the sentence, he runs, but when there's another noun in the sentence, the agent gets explicitly marked, and the patient is added in its regular default normal form. Him sees she. I'm banking on English's fixed word order being more powerful for you than English's case marking on pronouns. The idea is the man is the one seeing the woman. So there's two ways of doing this thing, and languages pick between them. But why on earth would any language, let alone nearly 1 in 4 of them, choose the ergative alignment? There are good historical reasons for this, and maybe choose was a strong word. Ergativity develops naturally. And I'll get to how that happens in a second. Hang in there. It's evolution. But first, let's think about the logic of why it might stick around once it's happened. Let's take a look at the new discovery of syntactic ergativity, and let's see how many people's brains can seamlessly make a switch between ergative and nominative systems on a daily basis, thanks to a linguistic gender distinction, but not the one you might be thinking of. The first important concept to understand how these systems stick around is economy of marking. The basic idea is that if you want to differentiate between two things, you don't need two markers. You need one marker that can be present or absent. Two states, 1 and 0, on and off. So languages often leave the default state unmarked. In ergative systems, the absolutive, that's S and P, is the 0 marked base, while the ergative, A, the agent, is the special case, used only when disambiguation is needed. And this makes even more sense when you realize that many languages don't have fixed word order like English, so it might not be clear who's doing what to whom without marking it somehow, as I had to with who and whom. Anyway, but is ergativity really how we think about these things in our brains, or just a weird little morphological game some languages play? Well, R.M.W. Dixon has an example from the Dyirbal language of Australia that he argues indicates a deeper level of ergative alignment in our thought rather than just a surface marking of nouns and pronouns. He has a pivot test for what he calls syntactic ergativity, and it goes like this. The man saw the woman and ran. So here's a question with an obvious answer. Who ran? But it's a trick question. In English, the only possible meaning of this is that the man ran. In Dyirbal, the only possible meaning of this is that the woman ran. After all, woman would have the same case marking in the man saw the woman and the woman ran. It's P in the first sentence, and the unpronounced noun is S in the second sentence. That's ergative alignment. This one blew my mind when I first read about it, not going to lie. For English speakers and speakers of many European languages, the idea of being able to use ergative alignment at all sounds daunting. But many people not only use it, but switch between nominative-accusative and ergative-absolutive alignment with ease all day, every day. And that includes in descendants of Proto-Indo-European that are distantly related to English. We're talking Hindi, Middle Persian, and others, although modern Farsi has shifted back to fully nominative-accusative alignment. So let's take a classic Hindi example. The boy reads the book. Forgive my pronunciation, is Ladka kitab padhta hai. Ladka is boy, kitab is book, and padhta is to read, and the verb agrees with boy. But the boy read the book does two things. First, it marks the agent, the boy, with ne, but it doesn't mark the book, the patient, with anything. So you get an extra morphological marker on the agent. That's ergativity, baby. And second, the verb agrees with the book now because it's padhi, not padhta, the feminine, like kitab, the book. Ladkini kitab padhi. And here's something really interesting. Ergativity is often conditioned by gender, but not like masculine-feminine. No, I mean noun class, and more specifically, the animacy hierarchy. Not all languages mark animacy explicitly, like Zulu and Cherokee, but even in those that don't, animacy can play a really important role. And it's not just animate or inanimate, it's a whole gradation with gods and humans at the top, above domesticated animals, wild animals, forces of nature, and like rocks and shit. Hindi's animacy effects are too complicated for this video, but it does play a role. And split ergativity can be split in different ways. In many languages, there's a shift between tenses. In others, it might be that pronouns stay nominative-accusative, but nouns follow an ergative-absolutive alignment, marking the, in some ways, unexpected doer. The unexpected doer sounds like a romance mystery. Okay, but how does this even happen? Well, first of all, remember that Hindi data? The language has nominative-accusative alignment in the present tense, but ergative alignment in the past. When an action is finished, we view it from the perspective of the result rather than the process, and that focuses on the patient. And that's related to the passive-to-ergative pipeline. Let's take something active. I built a house. Now you can make it passive. A house was built. Optionally, you can mark who did the building. By me. And you'll notice there's an extra word by, and it's me, not I in the nominative case. We have extra morphological marking for the doer. With high enough frequency, you can get a change over time where the passive construction loses its passive flavor and becomes the standard way to express the past. The by me is doing a sort of instrumental/agentive thing, and that becomes the new ergative case marker. From a functionalist perspective, it's not backwards. It's a solution to the problem of marking who did what while prioritizing the undergoer as the most stable referent point in a completed action. And if all that feels weird, well, we have traces of that in English. We historically sometimes called it the mediopassive. Not quite active, not quite passive. It's the mediopassive. What do you do with a sentence like, the vase broke, or the tailored suit wears well, or that sentence reads poorly? This was a question that bothered David Perlmutter and Jeffrey Pullum, who coined the term unaccusative to describe these. And a sentence like, I arrived is by analogy unergative. It's precisely those verbs that require to be instead of to have as an auxiliary verb in Romance languages like French, where you say je suis arrivé and not j'ai arrivé for I have arrived. I am arrived. Some languages even have a special verb conjugation for the unaccusative, but that's another video for another day. Leave me a comment if you want to see it. If you like this kind of content, don't forget to sign up for updates and secure a spot in my Linguistics Blueprint class. It's an intro to linguistics, open to anybody. And of course, subscribe. And of course, like and subscribe if you haven't, and please leave me a comment. They're great for the algorithm.
I'm Ron Burgundy?
Damn it! Who typed a question mark on the teleprompter?
You can support the channel here on YouTube with super thanks or over on Patreon at patreon.com/languagejones. Until next time, happy learning.